אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא ועת נעשה בחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא ואחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה.
Welcome back to a belated installment of Torah Perspective, Weekly Torah Perspective, which this week brings us to Parshas Emor. And I don't think I'm alone when I think that Parshas Emor poses some problems in our understanding. Let's face it, can we really relate to all these laws, all these halachas, what a Kohen can do? He cannot have a bruise here, and he cannot limp, and he cannot do this, and he cannot do that. And then about the animals, an animal which has this blemish, and an animal which has that blemish. We're all, I think, a little bit relieved when we come to Parshas HaMoadim. At least it talks about Pesach, and it talks about Shviras HaOmer, and it talks about Shavuos and Yom Tov, and wonderful. Then we feel that we are on familiar territory again. But this whole business with the, let's say, physical imperfections, all that stuff, we do not really relate to that so easily. And this is Torah. It is Torah just as much as Parshas HaMoadim. And we cannot simply walk past it and say, okay, that is a little bit alien to us. Let's quickly read through it and concentrate on more familiar territory. So therefore I decided to actually take a little bit of a dive into what Torah is actually all about and how we can integrate our understanding of Parshas Emor, also the difficult bits, with, let's say, a total picture of what Torah is. And for that, I went to a medrash which we find in Gemara Shabbos on Daf Peches, Amud Beis, 88b, and there it speaks about what happened when Moshe Rabbeinu went to heaven to receive the Torah. It's good that we talk about that because we're also holding in the period of the Shviras HaOmer, the counting of the Omer, the 49 days between Pesach and Shavuos, and we are supposed to use that time to prepare ourselves for Kabbalat haTorah, for the receiving of the Torah. So what is better than look at this medrash, this Agadah, this story, which I want to analyze with you in depth, really word by word. So I'll read to you and try to simultaneously give some translation, maybe elaborate on some points where it is appropriate to do so. Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, you know that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi is one of the Tanoim, one of the sages of the Mishnah, and he says, "B'shor she'olo Moshe leMoram." At the time that Moshe Rabbeinu went leMoram, we usually translate it as he went up to heaven. It doesn't say heaven; it says leMoram, to the elevated place. Moram is a word like Mokam. Mokam means place. Moram Mokaum is from lokum, to stand. Moraum is from lorum, to be elevated. Right? So he went to the elevated place. Amru Malachei HaShores Lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Then the Malachei HaShores, usually translated as the ministering angels, but it really means, Malach doesn't mean angel. Angel is derived from the Greek word angelos, and the Greek word angelos means messenger. And Malach in Hebrew also means messenger. We are really not doing a very good job when we translated angels, because with the word angels we import an entire mental picture shaped by what is called Western civilization of angels. And we don't mean that category that is current in our culture, in the Western culture that surrounds us. We have to understand the word itself. Malach means a messenger, but the real meaning of the word is somebody who has a job. A melacha is a task that you have to do. And the malachim have tasks that they should do. When my own children grew up and they would ask me, Daddy, what is a malach? I would give them a standard answer, and I give today exactly that same answer because I haven't thought of anything better to say. A malach is one instance of the will of Hashem. What I said to my children, a malach is an instance of the will of Hashem, means for me the following. Hashem's will is undifferentiated. What do we know about his will? He and his will are the same thing. The Hebrew word ratzon, will, and the word shemo, his name, have the same gematria. The same gematria. You know Hashem's will, you know Hashem. He and his will are one and the same thing. So, how can we talk about an instance of the will of Hashem? Well, we can talk about it because this will is, so to say, fractured into part, just like sunlight which falls through a prism, comes in as one undifferentiated white light, and then is split by the prism in all the colors of the rainbow, into an entire spectrum. Likewise, since Hashem is infinite and all-encompassing, and he is reality itself, and we are a product that he wants to be in his world, when Hashem relates to us, he cannot relate to us directly like you and I can relate to each other, because we are in the same parsha, as the saying goes. We belong to the same category. When we communicate with the creator of the universe, it cannot be a simple communication as it is between two human beings, as if the communication between two human beings is actually simple. It's actually a very complex process. And perhaps the communication with Hashem is much more simple, because it's much more essential. Anyway, whatever the case may be, we relate to HaKadosh Baruch Hu always partially. We try to focus on one aspect of his Ratzon, of his will, and do it. That is a malach. That is a malach. When a malach is sent, it's a well-known notion in the world of our sages. A malach has only one task, one specific task. He cannot do two things at the same time. He cannot have two tasks. He does one thing and then he goes back. We have another tradition or idea from the world of our sages, and that is that when you do a mitzvah, when you are fulfilling one aspect of the will of Hashem, that creates a malach. What do you mean? All of a sudden the malach comes into existence? No. It simply means that on the level of our physical actions, it's called a mitzvah. On the level of an implementation of Hashem's will, it is one aspect of that will. Memele, it's called malach. That's what malach means. Conversely, when, God forbid, we do an avera, we do a transgression, there is also a malach that is created by that transgression, God forbid. Because even by transgressing something, you are showing an aspect of Hashem's will in the negative way. So this is a clarification of the word malach. The malachei hashores are those malachim who are, so to say, nearest to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore have a greater overview, a greater communication with that will. They are also not beings, in inverted commas, whatever being means. They are also not entities that are on Hashem's level, because no one is and nothing is, but they're nearer. And that's why you find them in this place, Moram, the elevated place, and there you find the Malachei HaShores. And these Malachei HaShores, these ministering angels, Malachim, said before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Amru Malachei HaShores Lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, before the Holy One, Ribono Shel Olam, Master of the universe, Ma leyelod isho beinenu. What is this one who was born from a woman doing among us? Amar lohem lekabel Torah bo. He said to them, he's coming to receive the Torah. They didn't know what he was doing there. They didn't know why there should be any place for this earthly creature born from a woman in that elevated place. He doesn't belong there. Amru lefanov. Then these malachim said it to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Chemdo genuza shegenuza loch teisha me'os v'shivim v'arba doros kodem shenivra ha'olam. This hidden treasure that was hidden for you, or that was hidden maybe for your benefit even, shegenuza that you kept hidden for 974 generations before the world was created. Atom mevakesh litna lebasar adom. You really want to give that to flesh and blood, to mortal human beings? Again, we need to understand this. We need to understand what's going on with these 974 generations. Well, the notion of the Tatkaat Dauras, the 974 generations, comes from a pasuk in Tehillim where it says, Dovar tzivol le'elev dar. He commanded a dovar, a word, for 1,000 generations. And that refers to the Torah in this interpretation. And since we can make a very simple calculation based on our Chumash in Bereshis and Shemos, we see that there were only 26 generations from the creation of the world until the Torah was given. So why does it say that the Torah was given le'elef dar to 1,000 generations? There must have been 1,000 minus 26, that is 974 generations before the world was even created. Now, what do you talk about? A creating of the world, and there are generations before that creation? Various interpretations. One interpretation is HaKadosh Baruch Hu he created worlds and he destroyed them again, and he created worlds and he destroyed them again. Yeah, Bora alomas umacharivim. Bora alomas umacharivim. That's one interpretation. The other interpretation is these are generations that he wanted to create, but he changed his mind and he decided to postpone creation for 974 call them thought experiments. This is a kind of generation, or this is a kind of generation. We don't really know what this means. We know that it is a symbolism that is given to us for interpretation, for as let's say let's say it's food for our intuition. If we train our intuition diligently by learning, by being confronted with these texts, then we develop sort of an understanding what's going on. I'll tell you where I hold in this respect, but I don't claim any authority for that or any validity for that. But to me, it clearly reflects that man does not come at the beginning of the physical world. Man is a late appearance, and certainly the Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu is receiving has a pre-existence, as it says here in the Medrash, this treasure that was hidden with you for such a long time, it seems to say, now you want to give that to flesh and blood. Well, we'll see what the conflict here is. What do these malachim mean by this? And what is the answer to that? And immediately, they themselves come with the justification, and they quote Tehillim. Never mind that Tehillim was written by David HaMelech hundreds of years later. That's not the point of this Agadah. It tells you that what is expressed in this Perek in Tehillim, in Perek 8, Kapitel Ches, that is what these malachim were hinting to. And what does it say there? Ma enosh ki siskereno. What is man that you should remember him? Uven odom ki sifkedenu. And man, or the Son of Man, that you should either pay attention to him, or you can even translate that you should command him. What relationship does he have with you that he should receive your commandments? Hashem Adonenu Moadir Shimcho B'chol Haaretz. Hashem, our Master, our Lord, Moadir Shimcho B'chol Haaretz, how mighty is your name in the entire world. Asher Tenohadecho Al Hashomayim. That you should put your glory or your majesty above the heavens. Very, very difficult to understand what's being said here. But let's first observe that the Malachim do not quote these psukim in the order in which they appear in the Psalm, in this Perek in Tehillim. And I'll tell you, they first quote the 5th pasuk, Ma enaus kisis kerne, and then they quote the 2nd pasuk. The Mizmar actually starts with Hashem Adonenu Moadir Shimcho B'chol Haaretz, Asher Tenohadecho Al Hashemayim. So why do they quote it in a different order? Well, their point is, Ma enosh ki siskreno. The question that is asked in the psalm is, what is man? What is the place of man that he should have some kind of special place in God's creation? In fact, the first pasuk immediately says that Hashem is, his glory is even above the heavens. So how more so should he not relate to man? And the entire Mizmar then continues to say that despite this huge gap between the glory of Hashem, which is even above the heavens, and man who lives on this earth, despite that, man is charged with tremendous responsibilities. It continues to say in the Mizmar, in the Psalm, Vatechasrehu ma'at me Elohim, you have put him only a tiny bit below angels. V'chovat v'hodor ta'atrehu, and with honor and splendor you have crowned him. Right? But the Malachim do not follow the chronology of the Mizmah. They turn it around. They say, we start with highlighting that man is a lowly creature, and then we say that Hashem's glory transcends even the heavens. Whereas the Mizmah says, Hashem's glory is transcending even the heavens. Man is insignificant, and yet. But the and yet of the Mizmah is not visible to the Malachim. They cannot even see that. Why? Well, I think that what you must say is Malachim do not live in a world of development. They do not live in a world of progress that can be made. Yes, Philippe?
Potential.
They do not have potential. That's exactly right. Malachim do not have potential. They are what they are. Like the will of Hashem does not change over time. It is constant in time. Malachim are an instance of that will of Hashem, and therefore they are not in the world of time, development, and potential. They are what they are. They have that in common, by the way, with animals who do live in this world of time, but their time perspective is very, very limited. You've never seen an animal with a life insurance. It just doesn't happen. You will not find an animal with a life insurance. And the Hebrew word for behemoth actually expresses this notion because it is bo-mo. In it is what it is. It is what it is. It doesn't have a potential. Man, however,
Monkeys have potential.
the distinction between man and animal is not a clear distinction. You have higher and lower forms of animal life. And it's certainly anybody who has seen a dog looking at his master with these eyes, are you going to take me out for a walk, knows that animals have a sort of consciousness, a sort of knowing who they are. Some animals can recognize their own image in a mirror. It is nothing compared to man. Conversely, you find among men people who are barely distinguished from animals because they do not have any time horizon further than tomorrow or maybe the day after tomorrow. And they couldn't give tuppence for their potential. Potential is something that by its very nature need to be realized, and if you ignore it, it simply disappears. The potential isn't there anymore. It's there in principle, but in practice it's not there. So these malachim live in a non-temporal world, whereas animal life lives in a very limited temporal world with a time horizon which is very limited. Man, however, has a huge perspective on his future. He worries about his children, he worries about his own life, he knows about his death, which is a time perspective. He knows what he should leave in the world as a legacy, that's a time perspective. And human society sets itself goals if things are going well. If things are not going well, people do not have children, people do not care for the future of their communities, people do not care for the future of their planet, and they give up on their future. That is not Judaism's perspective, clearly. We have a notion of a collective future for humanity. And we call that Yemos HaMashiach, the Messianic Age. We will come to this subject in a little bit later on. So now we get the continuation of the Agadah, of the story of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Omar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu leMoshe hachazir lohem tshuva. Then HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Moshe Rabbeinu, you answer them. Is that fair? It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu's own ministering angels ask a question. They do not ask it from Moshe Rabbeinu. They have not addressed Moshe Rabbeinu. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu turns to Moshe Rabbeinu and says, you answer them. He said, Moshe Rabbeinu answered and said, Master of the universe, Misyore ani shema yisrafuni behevel shebefiyem. I am sorely afraid that they will burn me with the breath in their mouth. Moshe Rabbeinu, in effect, says to Hashem, it's your idea to give the Torah. I didn't ask for it, and I barely know what I'm talking about. I haven't seen it yet. We will see. It's explicit in the matters that he doesn't know what it says in the Torah. And here I see these beings that are much closer to you and are an instance. Each of them represents one facet of your Ratzon, of your will. And whatever they say is a representation of that will of yours. It will burn me if I'm confronted with that. It's a very good objection of Moshe Rabbeinu. It seems to be unfair that Hashem expects Moshe Rabbeinu to argue that he should receive the Torah. What's the argument here? Amalo, then Hashem said to Moshe, Achos b'chisei chvodi, grab on to the throne or the chair of my glory, v'chazar lehem tshuva, and give them answer. Shenema, me'aches pnei chisei. No, it's actually without an aleph. Me'aches pnei chisei, parshez alov anonau. It's a pasuk in Iyov, and it means he makes him grab the front of his kisei, is here kaf samach hey, not kaf samach aleph, which means chair or throne. This means covering, right? Lechasos means to cover. But to begin, the front of, he should grab hold of the front of the covering. Parshez, as a result, Parshez, he, the other actor in this pasuk, will spread over him, Parshez olov anonau, he will spread his cloud over him. Ve'amar Rabbi Nochum, and Rabbi Nochum explains this verse, and he says, Melamed shepiresh shakai miziv shchinoso ve'anonau olov. This teaches us that when Moshe Rabbeinu would grab the front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's throne of glory, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu would spread miziv shchinoso, from the splendor or the radiance of his Shekhinah, of his indwelling, a number of times in previous talks, right? So it's not too fanciful to say that although the verse in Iyov speaks about kisei, covering, it is not so different from this throne. Because what is a throne? Or a chair, rather. What is a chair? A chair, when you sit on a chair, you are nearer to what's below you than when you stand. And the symbolism of the Kisei HaKavod of Hashem is that it is some kind of interface between a much higher, call it in inverted commas, spiritual realm, It is on its way of revealing the divine presence in the world. That's called kisei. And when man grabs on to this kisei, then the cloud of Hashem, meaning the splendor or the radiance of his indwelling, will cover him. He will be inspired. That's the explanation. And that's why Hashem said, do this, and then you can answer. Amar lefonov. Then Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't do this. He doesn't answer them. Amar lefonov. He said to Hashem, Ribono shel olam, Master of the universe, Torah she'ato nosen li, maksiv ba. The Torah that you're going to give me, what's written in it? Give me already ammunition. Amma, Onochi Hashem Elokecha asher hotzesicha me'eretz Mitzrayim. What's written in there is, I am the Lord your God who has taken you out of the land of Egypt. Having heard this from Hashem, now Moshe addresses the Malachim. Amalohen, he said to them, Limitzrayim yiradatem, you went down to Egypt. Have you been servants to Pharaoh, who has enslaved you? Have you undergone this experience? Torah lama tehelochem. What do you need the Torah for if you haven't been in Mitzrayim? Shuv. Again he asked Hashem, Maksiv po, what's written in this Torah of yours? Hashem answered, Lo yeh lecho Elohim acherim, you shall not have other gods. Then Moshe Rabbeinu said to the Malachim, Ben agoyim atem shruim, she'ovdim avodah zorah. Are you dwelling among the nations who are serving idols? Shuv, maksiv be. He again asked, maksiv bo, what is written in this Torah? Zechar is Yom HaShabbos lekadesho. It says, honor the Shabbos that you, or remember the Shabbos that you should sanctify it. Then he answered, he said to the Malachim, Klum atem osim melocha, she'atem tzrichim shavus. Do you then do work that you need to cease work on Shabbos? Shuv maksiv bo. He again asked maksiv bo, Lo siso, do not swear falsely. Masu maton yesh benechem. You do business with each other so that you need to have a good reputation, that you shore up with swearing by what's holy to you. Shuv maksivo, what else is written in there? Kavetes avicho vesimecho, honor your father and your mother. Av ve'em yeshlochem, you have a father and a mother. Shuv maksivo, again, what's written in is Lo sirtzach, Lo sinov, Lo siknov. It says don't murder, don't commit sexual immorality, do not steal. Kinder yesh benechem, is there strife between you? Yetzer hara yesh benechem, there is a yetzer hara among you. After all this, miyad hodu lo laHakodesh Baruch Hu. Then the Malachim, they didn't agree with Moshe Rabbeinu. Miyad hodu lo laHakodesh Baruch Hu. Then the Malachim agreed with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Namely, that it is a good idea to give the Torah to mankind. Shenema, Hashem Adonenu Ma'adir Shimcho V'chule. Hashem, our Master, how mighty is your name. But this is not the second pasuk in the Mizmar. This is the last pasuk in the Mizmar. The Mizmar has described, and now we go to a good reading of this Mizmar. I won't read the whole Hebrew to you. You should look it up. It's beautiful. It says, Lamanat Seach, Alagitis, Mizmar LeDavid, on some kind of Alagitis, or I won't go into it. It's probably some kind of melody, but it has a symbolic meaning as well. Hashem Adonai Ma'adir Shimcho B'chol Ha'oretz Asher Tenoh Ha'odechol Al HaShemoim. This is what the Malachim said initially, right? Your name is mighty in the entire world. Therefore, you should put your glory above the heavens. And then the next pasuk says, "Mipi olim v'yonetim yisadato oz." From the mouth of babes and sucklings, you have established oz. Oz means might, but it is very often an indication of Torah. Hashem oz la'amal yitain means Torah. Leman sarerecho la'ashpis oyev u'misnakeim. In order for your enemies to be shut up, whether they be an enemy or somebody who is out for vengeance. It symbolizes all the ways in which mankind can make life difficult for each other, by vengeance, by strife. And it really says that mankind is not born that way. Nobody is born that way. And if you bring up children with this oath, with this Torah, you can form a counter force against this corruption of mankind. Then it continues, Ki when I see your heavens, the work of your fingers, your handiwork, the moon and the stars are which you have put in the sky, which you have established. I see the entire universe. What is man that you should remember him? That you should pay attention to him. You have put him a little bit below the angels, and you crowned him with honor and glory. You have made him rule over your creation, over your handiwork. Everything you have given under his feet. Rams and sheep and rams, kulom, all the animals together. Gam barmos sodai, also the beasts of the field. Sipar shomayim, the birds in the sky. Udegei hayom, and the fish in the sea. Over ochas yamim, those who go in the pathways of the sea. And then the last pasuk. Hashem Adonenu Moadir Shimcho B'chol Ha'oretz. Hashem, our Master, how mighty is your name in the entire world. And it is not followed by the next phrase, therefore you should put your glory above the heavens. On the contrary, and this is how the Medrash actually concludes, it says, Shenema, when it says Miyad Haudulala Kodesh Baruch Hu, the Malachim now agreed with HaKodesh Baruch Hu, Shenema Hashem Adonenu Mo'adir Shimcho B'chol Ha'oretz V'ilu Tenosh Haudachol Al Shemayim Lauksiv. But this phrase, give therefore your glory above the heavens, is not written here. The conclusion is not that there is an unbridgeable gap between what is above and what is below. On the contrary, it says that man, with his potential to rule over the entire creation, and as far as it is within his grasp, in his earthly realm, he has a tremendous potential and therefore a tremendous responsibility. He now needs to rise to the challenge. Now he needs to perfect himself. That brings us back to Parshas Emor. When Parshas Emor speaks about the physical integrity of the Kohannim, when Parshas Emor speaks about the physical perfection of the animals that we use for the divine service, for the Kabbalas, it speaks about a possibility that you have to split it into two issues here. First, let's look at the Kohannim and then look at these animals. The Kohannim, in the world where there is a Beis HaMikdash, play a very, very important role. It is not something that they do because they have an ambition to do so. They do so because it is their place in the organization of our people. They are, the Gemara asks a question, are Kohanim our emissaries to Hashem, or are they Hashem's emissaries to us? Kohannim shluche de Rachmona ninhu, al Kohannim shluche didon ninhu. I knew somebody whose name was Kashdan. You may have heard this name. It's a Kohanic name. And Kashdan means Kohane shluche de Rachmona ninhu. It's an abbreviation. It's a very interesting fact to know. But this is the question. The Gemara comes to the conclusion they're both. And that is symbolized in the word Kohen itself. Kaf He Nun adds up to 75. 75 is halfway between 70 and 80. This Mizmar that we learned is the 8th Mizmar. It is the level beyond 7. 7 is the measure of the natural world. 7 is also the measure of the Sfiros HaOmer that we count from Pesach until Shavuos. Is 7 times 7. Shavuos is the 50th day, meaning 8, meaning transcending this world. That is the instrument of Torah. Torah is our means of connecting to a realm, the realm of Torah, which is Moram, which is the elevated place. It belongs there. The Malachim was not wrong when they said, what do you mean you're going to give this to mankind? They were not wrong. They had a very, very good objection. However, Hashem overrules them. But he doesn't overrule them by saying, shut up, I have decided to do it my way. No, he overrules them and leaves it to Moshe Rabbeinu to give the answer. That is the awesome responsibility that we as human beings have, is that the answer that God expects to be given to his own ministering angels cannot come from him. It must come from us. We ask Hashem, what's written in your Torah? Hashem will tell us what's written in his Torah. And then we will set up the argument against the Malachim and say, you don't have any idea what we go through over here in our world. You have no father, you have no mother, you have no children, you don't have to do business. You are not involved at all in what it means to be human. But the Torah is the way in which being human becomes a realization of the most elevated instance of the will of Hashem. A total, and that's why, of course, our mitzvahs are so numerous. We have 248 mitzvahs, aseh, positive commandments, 365 negative commandments, and they correspond to the parts of our body. That tells us that there are two ways of having that body. You can have it and just live like an animal, or you can have it and implement Hashem's will in the world. Now, so the Kohannim as the kind of bridge between the 70 and the 80, between the world here below and the world there above, in a world of the Beis HaMikdash, must reflect perfection as far as humanly possible in every respect. They cannot have a limp. They cannot have a finger missing. That sounds crazy to us because we do not imagine that you would judge somebody whether he has a limp or not. That sounds inhumane, right? Of course it is inhumane in our world of Golus, in our world without a Beis HaMikdash. Physical reality and spiritual reality seem to be divorced from each other. That's why we do not have tzoras in our day and age, because tzoras, if it would hit us, we would interpret it as a purely physical affliction. We would not see that physicality and spirituality are exactly the two sides of exactly the same coin. That's the tragedy of not having a Beis HaMikdash. That's the tragedy of living in Golus. But the Torah doesn't tell us how we are. The Torah tells us how we can be. And in the world that we can live in, Kohanim will reflect in their physical appearance their spiritual role. Likewise, the animals. You want to bring a korban in the Beis HaMikdash? It doesn't function like your thoughts are okay, it doesn't matter what it's the thought that counts. No. In the world of Torah, it's not the thought that counts, because the thought and the action are identical in the world of Torah. That's why it is said that if you intend to do a mitzvah and circumstances impede that, circumstances stop you from doing the mitzvah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will account it as if you did the mitzvah, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes allowances for the world in which we live. But that doesn't mean that that's an ideal world. That doesn't mean that the world cannot be fixed. The world can be fixed, and then it will become completely and utterly obvious that physicality and spirituality are in essence the same thing. Now, I want to just stop here, but not before I have actually quoted the Kedusha of Musaf on Yom Tov. When the Kohannim go up to Duchen, we add a phrase to Kedusha in Musaf. And the words are, Adir Adirenu, Hashem Adonenu, Ma Adir Shimcha B'chol Ha'oretz. That's a quote from the Mizmar of this Agadah. Mo'adir Shimcha B'chol Ha'oretz. How mighty is your name in the entire world. But we don't stop there. We say, V'hoyo Hashem lemelech al kol ha'oretz. Hashem will be king on the entire world. Bayam hahu yeh Hashem echod u'shema echod. Then there will not be any more there above and here below. Right? What is the Shimcha? Shimcha b'chol ha'oretz. Your name in the entire world. But you are there. Bayamahu yeh Hashem echod u'shema echod. There will be a complete, integrated, an indivisible manifestation of the unity of the entire universe. Memele, there will be a unity of mankind and a common purpose. And that's the vision of the Messianic age. That is the long-term perspective that Judaism brings to the world. Is that the world is an unfinished job. It still needs to be finished. I'll leave it at that. Wish you good Shabbos.
והוא היה, והוא עובר, והוא עובר, והוא יהיה בתפארה. אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נשא בחפץ כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא ואחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה והוא עובר והוא יהיה בתפארה. אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נשא בחפץ כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא ואחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה והוא עובר בתפארה והוא עובר והוא יהיה בתפארה.